Welcome, everybody. We're going to let everyone come into the room, get settled in, and then we'll go ahead and kick this thing off. Um, Go ahead in the chat, and as you're filling in, go ahead and wave, say hi. Excited to get going here. Seeing a couple people filtering in. Hey, Chad, it's good to chat with you. Good to see you. Looks like we have Michelle joining. Hi, Michelle. And then we have Louie as well. Nice to see you, Louie. So everyone go ahead and join in. Like I said, we'll start here soon. Um, Go ahead and leave any questions that you have. As always, we will be sure to dig into those questions when we move my microphone here so you can see my nice little Signal House logo on this jacket. But yeah, so go ahead and filter in, leave questions if you have them in the comments, and we will get to them as we're able to, and we'll answer them here. So, with that, we can just go ahead and jump in. The topic for today's webinar is what messaging channel is right for your business. So depending on what kind of business you are, what kind of channel should you be leveraging? If you're reselling that connectivity, which kind of SMS or MMS channels are the best for different sizes of businesses, different industries? We're going to cover all of those things. So we're going to go over specifically 10DLC, short code toll free, and the new kid on the block that I am pretty excited about is RCS. So we're going to teach you all about those different components of messaging today. And we're going to start it off with a little bit about 10DLC. But first, let me tell you who I am. So I am Will Craig, co-founder of Signal House. Signal House is a messaging provider. We call ourselves the modern intuitive messaging provider, and we specialize in providing connectivity for CRM systems. So these are systems that have native messaging as well as systems where they have third-party marketplace applications. So we have a HubSpot application, for example, also looking at your Zohos, Go High Levels, and Salesforce. And we have an expertise in building CRM specific connections. So my co-founders were themselves co-founders of a CRM. That's how we all got connected. And it was a CRM where messaging was really at the core of what the system did. And so with that, we had a lot of experience with messaging. And that's our kind of our specialty and our story of kind of how we got here. That said, we can enable any message from an application to a person. So any message that goes from any software system and hits an end user device, we are able to power that. So let's go ahead and kick it off with 10DLC. So 10DLC, this is a channel that we in particular specialize in, and it's one that a lot of people use. And that is because 10DLC, first and foremost, is great for local messaging. So 10DLC, what this stands for, and if you missed our first webinar, we actually really dug deep into the 10DLC framework and explained the campaign registry and kind of all the nuances that go with that. So if you haven't already checked that out, please do. I'll also try to remember to make that an end card at the end of the webinar when we upload it on YouTube. So it's a mental note for myself to do that. But yeah, we'll go ahead and jump in, talk about 10DLC. Again, 10DLC stands for 10-digit local number. So the local means that the area code is going to be a local 3-digit area code. So I, for example, am located here in Columbus, Ohio. Our predominant area code 614. And so anytime I get a message from a 614 number, I know it's a local business. And that really is the golden part of 10DLC is that 10DLC is a respected channel for a local business. So if you want to have a spot in your community, you want people to be able to see that number and have trust already built in that you understand the customer and their situation, 10DLC is the perfect channel because it's a local number. If I am shopping and I am looking for tires, for example, I think this is the same example I used in the first webinar, but if I'm looking for tires and I'm shopping for tires, it's going to be a lot better for me if I have a local business that knows what it's like driving around this area, what kind of weather conditions we get into, things of that nature. If I reached out to my local tire shop and they sent back a text with, or if I just reached out and said I wanted to hear from tire shops and it reached out with an area code from a completely different area, or even a toll-free, more national number, it wouldn't have that same level of trust. So again, it's great for local businesses. It has, getting into more of the nitty-gritty of it, it also has pretty decent throughput. I say pretty decent throughput because it's generally enough, especially if you're a small or a regional business. But it is not going to be great for high volume or if you need all of your contacts to get the same message at one time. 10DLC might not be the best for that. It has the lowest throughput of short code and toll free. But if you are sending between 2 and 6,000 messages per day, that's really the sweet spot for 10DLC. So when it comes to throughput, your standard 10DLC number, if you're on just a standard normal campaign, is going to be 2,000 messages for T-Mobile per day. And it's going to be 6,000 total, or sorry, it's going to be 2,000 messages for T-Mobile per day. And then for AT&T, it's going to be around 240 messages per minute. There is also a low volume variant of this. So if you are sending less than 6,000 segments per day, you'll want to go with a low volume 10DLC campaign. And again, if you need to know more about campaigns, check out our first webinar. We really dug deep into that topic. So it's going to have decent throughput. It's going to have, again, the kind of the lowest level of throughput, but the throughput's still going to be enough if you're doing business in a local area. It also is low cost. So that's the great thing about 10DLC is the numbers are relatively cheap. It's only going to be anywhere from, I mean, some companies give you the numbers for free, but it's going to be anywhere from free to $1 or maybe at the most $2 per phone number. And as we get into the other channels, you'll know that is pretty cheap. So those are kind of the positives when it comes to 10DLC. But unfortunately, like with everything, there are some negatives. And so one of the negatives around 10DLC is that it's really susceptible to message filtering. And so this is the carriers or the DCAs or potentially your message provider filtering your messages. And so what filtering means is it just essentially blocks your message from reaching the handset. So whatever person that you are messaging, they won't receive your number. There's keywords that they look for during this message filtering. We're going to go into that a little bit deeper on another webinar here in the future. But what you need to know is that 10DLC numbers can be more susceptible to message filtering or messages not being delivered to the recipient than other messaging channels. Another thing is that this approval process for 10DLC is the simplest. So that's not obviously a con, but the con of the approval process is it's changing every single day. So the 10DLC approval process is maybe not changing every day. There might be a little bit of hyperbole, but it changes pretty frequently. It's a young channel, so we haven't necessarily been text enabling landlines or enabling VoIP or voice over internet protocol numbers for very long. A VoIP number or VoIP number is essentially just a 10-digit phone number that you're able to obtain online, and you don't have to have obviously like a physical device. But it's a young channel, and with any young channels, there's going to be a lot of change as we lock in a more established process. And so we went deep into this process in the first webinar, but what's important to know about it is that, again, it is changing pretty rapidly, and sometimes it turns into kind of a guess and check process. So you're submitting it, it might get approved today, you submit the same thing tomorrow, and it could be rejected. It's also an individual review process at a DCA or a direct connect aggregator. And if you don't know these terms, I will try my best to define all of them as I talk about them. So direct connect aggregator is essentially the middleman or the connector between the message provider, like a signal house or like the big T as we call it. And it's a red T for those who are interested in that. So you can put two and two together. But so it's the link between your messaging provider and the carriers. And so it enables your messages from going from the message provider to the carriers. And so these DCAs have people that work in them, and they manually review every single submission. And in the same way that there are sometimes people that have different standards with reviewing anything. They have different standards at the DCAs as well. So you could have one reviewer that says this campaign is perfect, and you could have another reviewer that says, no, this campaign is not good. Now, I will say, and I can't go too deep into it right now because we have to get through all of our topics today, but we will be talking about this on an upcoming webinar, how you can create a specific use case for your business, especially inside of some of these larger messaging providers like the Big T, so that you're able to make sure that you have quick, proactive, consistent 10DLC approvals. Okay, so final thing, let's just do a wrap up. 10DLC. Who is 10DLC good for? 10DLC is perfect for any local or regional business. So when I say local business, I mean a business that is endemic to a specific community. So if you have a small shop or a store or a restaurant, whatever the case may be, and it's a local community place, perfect for 10DLC or regional businesses. So businesses that have a physical location and multiple different locations. So having a phone number for each of those businesses in that one locale, that is perfect for 10DLC. It's also probably the best the best sort of two-way communication channel, just because it's so natural for an end user to respond to a 10-digit number. It's hitting their phone and looking like it could be a person they know or a friend. It's not obvious that it's coming from an automated system or an application of some kind. So for conversational messaging, and if your business is centered around conversational two-way communication, 10DLC is going to be the gold standard for you. So moving on, that's everything about 10DLC. Let's talk short code. So short codes, and I did it in this order because short code it's not the opposite of 10DLC, but it definitely is on one extreme. And that extreme is throughput, process of getting approval, and just the reach that a short code has. So a short code, to define it, it's going to be a message that you would receive on your phone from a 5 or a 6-digit number. So it can be 5 or 6 digits. And those 5 or 6 digits could be totally random, or it could be a specific 5 or 6 digits that like company specifically wanted to get. So there's really two types of short codes there. If it is a specific one, it's called a vanity short code. Otherwise, it's just a regular short code. So if you wanted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, for example, you'd probably be paying quite a bit more than the already fairly high price of a short code. And so I guess it's a kind of a perfect transition into the cost. So short codes are expensive. So they can be anywhere from $500 to several $1,000s, to be completely honest with you. They are not cheap, but what you give up in, I guess, the cost of a 10DLC is throughput. You essentially have unlimited throughput. You also essentially have non-existent filtering. Now, the caveat to that is that this approval process is extremely tough. The approval process for a short code is quite difficult. So unlike 10DLC, where you have the DCAs and these different carrier networks that all work together with the campaign registry, short code is you are submitting it to the carriers for the carriers to review. Now, you're most likely submitting it from your messaging provider. So you're submitting it through your messaging provider to the carriers. But nonetheless, each individual carrier is going to review that. So in the US, of course, that's Verizon, AT&T, and T-Mobile are going to be the big three that are going to be reviewing your specific submission. And they are going to be making sure that you have crossed every T and dotted every single I. It is so important with short codes that is done up front and is reviewed correctly because of the reach that a short code has. So again, it is expensive. There are costs associated with this. It is a tough approval process, but once you get a short code approved, it's essentially the gold standard of messaging because of the non-existent filtering. So if you're a national brand, or if you do exceptionally high volume, or you don't necessarily do super high volume, but you need all of your messages to be delivered at essentially the same time. So think about like an alert if there was an incident that occurred or something like that. The short code is going to be the best way to make sure that you have all of that delivered to your recipients. So Who is short code good for? Who is short code maybe not so good for? As a wrap up, short code is perfect for national established brands. So if I'm getting a short code message, I'm expecting that to be a massive company, and I'm not expecting to have conversational messaging with that company. So I think of Delta Airlines, Coca-Cola, Macy's, Walmart, those companies I would think of if they're going to send me a message, it's most likely going to be a short code. Now, the positive of this, I guess, to start with that, is that it's definitely going to confer that you are an established brand because, again, short codes are hard to get and they're expensive. What it's also going to do is it's not going to be super personal because, again, it's a short code. You know, when you get a short code, that exact same message has been sent to most likely tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people. Whereas a 10DLC message, again, it can feel a little bit more personalized. So, on to the second to last or the penultimate channel that we're going to be talking about today. That's toll free messaging. So, toll free messaging is going to be nestled really well in the middle of 10DLC and shortcode. So, toll free is going to be a 10-digit number. It's just going to have the 833, 844. Like those are going to be the numbers that you see with a toll free message. So it's a national number because it's a toll-free number. That area code isn't endemic to a specific area. It is going to give you higher throughput than a 10DLC number. It will not give you as high of throughput as a short code number, but it will give you higher throughput. It can get filtered, but it's not as susceptible to being filtered as a 10DLC number is. It's going to be more expensive than a 10DLC, but cheaper than a short code. And while there is filtering with or while there's kind of limited filtering with a toll free, you can easily get shut down with a toll free number. And so let's double click on that and dig in a little bit more and kind of explain a little bit more about that. So with a toll free number, once you get your toll free number approved, it's not as set it and forget it as a short code, but it's also not as risk avoidance. Like you're not trying to really plan out your messages, looking at the verbiage and everything else as much as you do with 10DLC from a content standpoint. But if you are sending messages that the carriers identify as being spammy or potentially could be a scam or whatever the case may be, if there's certain trigger words that are in your messages with a toll-free number, you can absolutely fully get shut down. They can just turn off your messaging just like that, super quick. Now, this can happen with short codes. This can also happen with 10DLC. But with 10DLC, you normally would get a carrier flag. So the carriers would essentially let you know, hey, we're seeing too high of an opt-out rate. We're seeing a little bit too much failed delivery. So, what's going on here? We're going to limit the number of messages that you can deliver to our recipients as a carrier because we don't want that liability. A short code is going to obviously make sure you get kind of all of those messages there. But if you are potentially sending non-opted in messaging on a short code, you can get a little bit of filtering there, or at least a warning before you have any additional issues with the short code. Toll free, you can just absolutely get shut down at a drop of a hat, and it's really hard to get that number back working. Now, there is a fun fact about short codes, however, and I know I talked a lot about the big T in the last webinar, which is, of course, Twilio. Twilio is really the number one toll-free messaging platform. And so the reason for that, and this is just a fun fact for everyone to know, a little insider knowledge. So Twilio acquired a company called ZipWhip several years ago. ZipWhip essentially owned the toll-free ecosystem. So now Twilio, having acquired ZipWhip, they now essentially own the toll-free ecosystem. So if you are sending toll-free messages, I won't lie to you, the cheapest messaging you can get for toll-free is with Twilio. Now, here's the caveat. What I would do if I was a Twilio customer who was wanting to do toll-free is I would get other bids for my traffic. So I would go to the other messaging providers of the world, and I would get a quote from them. Hey, what can I get for this volume on toll free? And if they quote you anything that is the same as what you're getting at Twilio, I would go to Twilio and I would say, hey, listen, we have to do something about this because I know that you guys have the direct connection between the carriers for the toll-free market. You can definitely give me a better deal than a competitor who is essentially reselling your messaging because every toll-free message today, every toll-free message is routing through Twilio before it goes to the carriers. Now, is that the reason why it can get shut off randomly? I will let you guys decide that. But in general, toll-free is going to have the cheapest rates on Twilio. Another fun fact about toll free, having a lot of fun facts today, is that Bandwidth, a company that is a messaging provider in the space, they project that toll free will be the fastest growing channel in 2025. And why is that? It's kind of interesting. And I've thought a lot about this because again, I see toll free as being that kind of perfect in the middle. And so a jack of all trades, but essentially master of none. And the way that I have formulated this in my mind is that, and this transitions into who is toll free perfect for. And it's that if the throughput of a 10DLC message is not going to be enough for your company, you want a national presence, or that's not the most important part, but you want a 10-digit number with higher throughput than 10DLC. That is going to be where a toll-free number is going to serve you best. So if you want a national presence or you want a 10-digit number, because again, it looks like it's a little bit more of a friendly number, it looks like it's a local number, or at least it is local to an area, even if it's not, of course, local to the recipient's area, it still is a little bit more personalized, and your end recipient may not immediately, if they don't recognize that first three numbers as a toll-free area code, they will think it's a more personalized message and it's not being delivered from a machine. So it's essentially that perfect mix of higher throughput but a little bit more personalized than a 10 DLC. Okay, now on to the one that I think is super interesting. It's not fully here today, and that's RCS messaging. So what's RCS? RCS is Rich Communication Services. So what does that mean? Great question. So RCS is essentially a rich version of SMS. So a rich version of SMS means that it's SMS with a couple creature comforts that we all have become used to if we use iMessage. So iMessage, it's what's called an OTT channel, an over-the-top channel, which means it exists outside of the carrier network and the carrier ecosystem. It means that an iMessage is delivered between iPhone and iPhone. It is not delivered from iPhone to AT&T back to iPhone. So it exists outside of that carrier network. Now, RCS is not OTT in the sense that it does use the carrier network to facilitate delivery. However, it does have some of the benefits that iMessage has. So when you send an RCS message, you will see that message gets delivered, which we do, of course, have delivery receipts for other SMS channels. But you'll also see if it's opened. You'll see if it's read. So very similar to email, where you have email open rates and read rates, you have the same with your RCS message. You also see typing indicators. So you see when the other individual is typing. So as a business, you essentially know, hey, this customer is getting ready to respond to me. So it's a really powerful thing that you have. And that's really the basic component, but it's a really powerful thing because you have a lot better metrics that you can use to A/B test the messaging that you have going out. Now, I said that that kind of just scratches the surface of RCS. And so, what do I mean by that? And it's that RCS goes beyond just enabling you to send a message with a read receipt and everything else. It allows you to send much richer in the form of media driven campaigns to people as well. So with RCS, you can send what are called rich messages or rich media, which is a card that is sent that has an image and it has some call to action buttons. So the way that you can think about this is it's kind of like an ad that you would see on Facebook or Instagram or whatever the case may be, where there's different actions that you can click on a button to see more or to do this or to do that. And then there's additional workflows that happen when you do that. What's really cool about this is the example that I always give is that instead of getting a text message with a link that says, "Hey, Will, this is Hotel ABC. We have upgraded you to a new room. Click this link and hit the yes button on the web page if you want it." So if I got that message, would I read it? Most likely not, frankly. And would I click a link in a text message that I got? I don't know if I would or not. If I knew who it was, I would click the link. We do still see pretty good click-through rates on TindLC, for example, but I'm much more likely to do it when I actually see an image of my upgraded room and then a button on the message itself that says yes. So it prevents you from having to leave the messaging window. And probably the biggest benefit is that instead of it being from a phone number, if it's business messaging, of course, instead of it being from a phone number and them saying this is ABC Hotel in the message, it's going to have the logo for ABC Hotel as the image that pops up next to the kind of the icon. And then it's going to have the name of the business underneath that. And then you're going to be able to go to the profile of the business again, just straight from your messaging app. And you're going to be able to see all of the details about the business there. So you'll be able to see their website, their support page, ways to get in contact with them, all of that again, directly from your messaging window. So if this seems pretty crazy and out there and everything else, it is definitely a leap forward for different kinds of messaging. It's also not fully live yet. So in the US, Verizon has some contracts with different messaging providers. T-Mobile is the next carrier to have messaging providers. This webinar is being recorded on February 5th of 2025. We expect T-Mobile to have a contract in place and to start sending some test cases of RCS, or the business version being RBM or RCS business messaging. We expect them to do that sometime later this month or by the end of this month. Basically, by the end of Q1, we expect there to be some T-Mobile messages being sent. And by the end of Q2, we expect some AT&T messages to be sent. So if you're a business that's listening to this and you are thinking, how can I leverage the power of RCS? Frankly, it's going to be a while. So there is going to be a period of time prior to you being able to really fully leverage the power of RCS. I expect that there will be a soft launch for really large corporations by Black Friday of this year. There were some test cases on Black Friday and Cyber Monday of last year. Simple Human was one of them. And I was able to kind of chat with one of the engineers that launched it. And safe to say the results were really incredible. So be on the lookout for that as a business. We at Signal House are definitely going to try to enable that for mid-market and SMB customers. That's our avatar. It's our bread and butter. That's who we love to help serve. And so we will be out there trying to make it happen for you. If you have any questions about RCS, feel free to send me an email. That's will@signalhouse.io. I'd love to chat about it and talk through how it could help your business. But for right now, it is something that is just on the horizon. So let's do a quick recap, and then let's go into audience questions. I already see some really good questions that are here in the chat. So as a super quick recap, TindLC. Who is TindLC for? It is perfect for a local or regional business who wants to be known or seen in the community and have meaningful, personalized, two-way communication. Now, who is short code great for? It's great for national, established, large brands that want to send out a high volume or a lot of volume all at once, and it's not necessarily a conversational message. It can be, but it's not necessarily a conversational message. And then who's toll-free for? Toll-free is great for a company that wants that 10-digit number so it still seems personalized, especially to people who may not necessarily know that it's not a TindLC message. So it will not seem like it's coming from a computer, but they need just a little bit more throughput than what a TindLC offers. So that's for toll free. Now, RCS, who's RCS for? Today, RCS is really for large enterprise companies that are working directly with the carriers. We expect the SMBs, mid-market enterprise companies, and smaller enterprise companies to be fully on RCS by early next year. We're going to be able to help lead the charge in that as well here at Signal House. So let's move on to audience questions. I see some really good questions here. We may not be able to get to all of them, but we're going to try our best to get to all of them. And so let's see what we have here. Okay, so first one here looks like it's from Greg. So Greg asks, I operate an automotive chain in 6 different cities. Would you recommend one short code number or several 10 DLCs? That's an amazing question, Greg, and I have an answer for you. And the answer is it totally depends. And the reason that it depends is it depends on what you feel is right for your business based on the kind of messaging that you're sending. So if I am sending a message that says, check out this automotive chain in a city near you, you could potentially do that with a short code. The way that I would recommend doing that, though, is with 10 DLCs. So if you have automotive chains, I'll just assume you have 6 different stores, one in each city. I would have 6 different 10 DLCs for each of those, or one for each of those businesses. So 6 10 DLCs total. And I would use those to communicate directly with the people in that community. And again, with a 10 DLC, you can be so personalized. You can say, you can pull in what we generally call merge tags or personalization tags that essentially have a placeholder for you to put data in. This is something a lot of CRM systems will do. Is that you're able to essentially say, hey, first name, this is whatever your name is with the automotive chain. Winter is coming here in the city name. And we want to make sure that you're able to navigate the roads effectively. Just an example. So you can really tailor those messages for the people in those communities. And what we see from that is that you do get really, really, really good response rates. And SMS channel, by the way, has a 98% open rate. So you always know that at least there's going to be eyes on that message. So if you're providing a personalized message and it is designed to really drive communication forward, people will respond 100%, and you will be able to do business with those individuals. So to wrap up, Greg, I would say, me personally, I would go with the 10 DLC, and I would do hyper personalized messages for those people in the specific communities that you work in. But if you wanted to go short code and send out a little bit more generalized messaging for your brand specifically, I think that's valuable as well. It's totally up to you. I mean, for example, I get Macy's short code messages, and I, of course, don't get just a 614 number in Columbus messaging me about the local Macy's. I do get a short code. So it really just depends on your preference. I personally would go 10 DLC with hyper personalized messages. Okay, give me 1 second. I'm going to take a drink out of this nice Signal House mug here. My mother-in-law got me this for Christmas. I love it. Okay. So my company doesn't send a high volume of traffic, but we send all of our messages at the same time ahead of a new merchandise drop. What channel is best for this, Javon? Well, Javon, I feel like I may have already answered this, and that is short code. So a short code is going to be perfect if you need all of your messages delivered at one time. And the reason for this is just when it comes down to the throughput limitations of different messaging channels. So for 10DLC, it's really going to depend on the carrier what your throughput allotment is. And by throughput allotment, I just mean how many messages you can send over what duration of time. So T-Mobile limits that on the 10 DLC channel to 2,000 messages per day on the starting tier, whereas AT&T does a certain amount of messages per minute or messages per second. Verizon, they don't publish their limits, so we don't necessarily know them, but they do obviously have their own throughput limitations as well. Short codes, on the other hand, is going to be the highest bandwidth of messaging. So if you need to message 100,000 people and let them know that your new merchandise drop hit at this exact moment and that you're going to sell out fast, the best way to do that really is with a short code. You could potentially use another messaging channel, maybe a 10 DLC, maybe multiple 10 DLCs and target to a specific area. But that just depends on your specific business. If I was a hyper local store in a large market and I was doing kind of in-person meetups, I might get 10 to 15 to maybe even 25, 30 10 DLCs and just send out individual traffic on those 10 DLCs. But if you really truly have a national audience and you want all of them to know at one singular time that something happened, I would certainly do that with a short code. And if you need any help navigating that short code process, Javon, please send me an email. It can be a little bit confusing, regardless of the messaging provider that you work with. The carriers are going to have the same qualifications and requirements for getting that submitted. And I can definitely take a look at it and help you out the best that I can. So thanks, Javon. Okay, Crystal says, I know I want 10DLC, but don't know what information to submit. I represent a larger organization, but have my own company. Okay, so I think what I think I understand what you're asking. So essentially, you want to sign up for a 10DLC, but you don't know what business to register the 10DLC message with. It's a really good question, Crystal, and it's actually not something that we touched on the last webinar. So I will go into it now. So as a company that is represented by another company, essentially you're a DBA is how I would verbalize that. And when you submit your brand for 10DLC, you do have the option to fill out a legal company name and then a DBA name. So here's what I would do. I would fill out the legal company name as whatever the parent company is that you represent. And then I would use their EIN in the submission. And then I would put the DBA name as whatever your DBA is. And so I would put, again, legal company name is the legal company name, DBA name, and then put that EIN in there. And sorry, did I say the EIN is the legal? Okay, so let me rephrase that. Let me make sure I got this right for you. Crystal, I apologize. So what you want to do is you want to put in their parent company as the legal company name. You then want to put in your DBA is the DBA name, and the EIN should be the EIN associated with your DBA because you have to register the brand, not the brand behind the brand, if that makes sense. And so it's a rejection that I've seen many, many times when I did this wrong, just like I inverted it right there when I said it. So I'm only human. I apologize. I mixed that up and said that wrong. You'll want to sign up with the brand that is the larger organization as a legal company name. Your company that it represents that company should be the DBA, and then the EIN should be your company's EIN, or essentially should be the DBA EIN. So that's what you'll want to go with to submit it. If your brand gets rejected, so it shows up as unverified, or whatever messaging provider you're working with says, hey, Crystal, this did not go through, please shoot me a message. I'll take a look at it. I want to make sure that you get fully signed up, ready to go, and you're able to send out that traffic. All right, Michael, I heard toll-free messaging is essentially just spam and to either go with 10DLC or short code. Is that not true? Michael, so it's interesting that you say that. So toll free has had an interesting past in the messaging space. And so for a while, people did kind of see toll free as a way to get around some of the registration requirements for 10DLC, which again, I wouldn't say directly means that it's spam, but it could, fall into that category. What has happened now is that the toll free process has become a little bit more strict. And with that being more strict, it essentially, of course, is going to mean that you're not going to have as much spam on toll free. And like I said, when we were talking about toll free, the big thing with toll free is that if you are sending spam messages or you're not getting consent or whatever the case may be, your messaging will get shut off. So there are organizations that are watching that. They will shut your messaging off. And it is a royal pain. And trust me, it's a royal pain to get that toll free messaging turned back on. So what's best is to not spam with a toll-free message or a toll-free number to avoid that in the first place. It's just not worth going down that path. So you can certainly go with a 10DLC or a short code. I do still think toll-free is a viable channel, and I'm not alone. Again, there's companies projecting that it's going to grow the largest out of any channel this year. So I really do think that it is a viable option for you if you fall kind of in that best use case for toll-free category. Okay, so Leah says, I was hoping you'd talk about RCS. How does that compare to WhatsApp? Do you think it'll actually launch? It's a really good question, Leah. Um, yeah, I have to check my clock here to make sure that I don't sit here and talk about RCS for 6 hours because I totally could. It's super exciting. But I don't want to lose all of you. And I know that you all have to get back to your very busy work days and everything else. So I will do my best to keep this short. So, how does it compare to WhatsApp? Well, if you'll remember back when I was talking about RCS and where iMessage in particular. iMessage is an OTT channel, an over-the-top channel that is transmitted outside of the carrier network. WhatsApp is the same way. WhatsApp is obviously owned by Meta, and Meta makes sure that you're able to transmit your messages between WhatsApp sender IDs or your sort of phone numbers or names on WhatsApp with whatever company you are communicating with. So in that way, it is different than RCS because RCS is native to your phone. It's in your actual messaging application on your phone and it's delivered through the carriers. What's similar to WhatsApp is that you do have rich messaging solutions, or essentially you have those more images, videos. You can put a lot more data inside of an RCS message than a traditional SMS. WhatsApp is very much so the same way. So more high quality images, videos, etc. Where I think the large comparison is just how many handsets natively support it. And so you can make an argument that every handset that can download WhatsApp supports WhatsApp, but it's not native support because you still have to go to the App Store and you have to download WhatsApp, you have to sign in, you have to create an account, etc. If you open a brand new iPhone today, it's RCS capable. If you open a brand new Pixel or Samsung, it's RCS capable. That really, in my opinion, is the big delta between RCS and WhatsApp. Is RCS is again a native channel. What RCS also, and so around the do you think it'll launch? I do think it'll launch. I am an RCS bull. Now, what does that mean? Well, I think it'll launch because of one specific thing, and that is the revenue that the carriers are currently missing out on from WhatsApp and from iMessage in general. So, because the carrier networks don't really make anything from WhatsApp or iMessage, the carriers certainly want to make sure that whatever new channels come and potentially disrupt SMS, they're able to get a chunk of. And so, in the US today, WhatsApp has really low adoption rates. So, off the top of my head, I don't know what that adoption rate is, but I frankly and anecdotally, obviously, this is just me personally, but I anecdotally don't really know anyone who uses WhatsApp. There are people who, of course, use some other kind of similar channels, like you have Viber in the EU, you have WeChat in China. There are a couple other ones off the top of my head, but in general, WhatsApp has excellent penetration everywhere, really, except for the United States. And the reason for that is because in the US, SMS is free and we just prefer to text each other. So in the US, I certainly think RCS will launch. Now, in other countries where WhatsApp is already endemic, do I think it'll launch? I do. And here's the reason why. It's because a lot of the companies that are doing business outside of the US are still US based companies. And those US based companies are going to support RCS because of the benefits that it has for businesses in the US. So I think you can make an argument that businesses that currently operate in the US but use WhatsApp globally may still use WhatsApp globally. I just personally think that they're going to use RCS since they're already using RCS in the US. It also, of course, is native. So the second that RCS became live globally, there were 2.2, I believe, billion active users of RCS or RCS capable devices. And in general, depending on where you're at in the world, your cycle for getting a new phone is anywhere between 1 to 3 years on average for the population. And as people continue to upgrade their phones, the amount of RCS enabled devices is just going to grow. And so it's a safe way to know I can deliver a message to literally anyone in any part of the world with essentially this global standard. So that was probably a little bit more information than you necessarily were looking for. But yeah, I think the way that it compares to WhatsApp is it does have the same image quality and everything else that WhatsApp is going to have. But what it does not have is it does not have like WhatsApp does not have that sort of native component, which of course RCS does. Okay. So a couple more questions here, and then we'll break. So, what if I'm what if I'm an SMS reseller? What channels should we offer? Is having connections for all channels necessary? So this is Jax. Jax, I would love if you're in the chat right now, could you just let me know what industry you are in? So you say you're an SMS reseller. I'm kind of automatically going to assume that's CRM or some kind of omni-channel messaging Okay, CRM. Okay, thank you so much, Jax. So, yeah, so you're a CRM. You're offering SMS. So I think the industry matters. Also, the location matters. So in the United States, it definitely is more common to use 10DLC. So 10DLC really is kind of the standard for a lot of messaging applications because it drives responses. Now, if you have some kind of enterprise grade software solution that is some kind of proprietary build of a Salesforce or something like that in a larger organization, again, I think that, short code could potentially be beneficial if you have a global or a national audience. But for most of the customers that you're reselling to, 10DLC is going to be the channel that they use because they most likely are small businesses. Just by the sheer sort of power law of business, there are going to be more small businesses than enterprise companies. And those small businesses are going to work in a specific locale, and having that 10DLC number is going to more benefit them. And because it's cheaper, it's going to be easier for them to see the direct ROI of that messaging. Now, let me put my CRM hat on, Jax, and I'll tell you, you should ask your customers. So, your customers are going to know best what kind of messaging they want to use. And so, whatever channels they want to use, I would certainly build them in. Your messaging provider, I don't know who your messaging provider is, but whoever your messaging provider is, oh, okay, thank you, Twilio. Okay, so you're using Twilio. So, Twilio, like most other messaging providers, have an omni-channel API, which means you'll be able to use essentially any kind of messaging channel that that messaging provider offers through a single send SMS API. So, regardless of what kind of messaging you really want to build in, it should be through the same API regardless. And because of that, I would say ask your customers, get feedback from your customers, start with 10DLC. I think that's table stakes, but start with 10DLC and then kind of go from there. Okay, Lynn asks, you talk about filtering above. Can you explain that more? I get it's the carriers blocking the messages, but how do they do this? Lynn, that's a great question. So each messaging provider and DCA and carrier does it a little bit differently, but I'll generalize that. So my company, Signal House, we do not have today, we do not have content filtering built into our platform. We trust our users. We know our customers, or KYC, know your customers, and we know the kind of traffic that they're sending out. We trust that they're having good business relationships with their consumers. Other messaging providers, of course, as you get very large and at scale and you have a lot of people on the platform that you don't necessarily know all of your customers, you may need to build in what's called content filtering. So essentially what they do is they use all of these LLMs or AI technology that we've all been hearing about, and they train these models to identify the likelihood that a message is spam. So essentially, they'll take these models, and this is very black box. People don't necessarily know how these models work, or like what content will get filtered. And of course, they don't want to publish that because they don't want people working around it. But essentially, they're going to feed that a list of messages or a group of messages that have been shown to be spam in the past. So we know for a fact that these are scams or whatever the case may be. They're going to break down those messages, and then each message that comes through, they're going to do a, similarity test or a likelihood test of, is this also spam based on all this training data that is spam or is a scam. If that likelihood is a certain percentage, and again, this is going to be specific for each company, then they'll filter out the message and it won't reach the handset of whatever recipient you're trying to send the message to. And so this can again happen at the messaging provider level. It can happen at the direct connect aggregator level. And again, remember, this is kind of the link between the messaging provider and the carriers is the DCA. So it can happen at that level and it can happen at the carrier level. Now, Lynn, I'm going to ask you, and please respond in chat. What messaging provider are you currently using today? Because there are some messaging providers that do see higher content filtering than others. And okay, I'm actually not familiar with that company, Lynn, but I will look into them and I will I'll reach out. If you can just reach out to me at will@signalhouse.io, I will be able to get back to you as soon as I look into them. But let me tell you about a couple ones that I'm like aware of specifically. Like for example, I do know that people do have higher filter rates on Twilio, for example. Twilio has their own built-in content filtering, and if you say certain things or they flag it as being, for example, in financial services or whatever the case may be, your message could get filtered in that instance. So generally, we do see higher filter rates on Twilio. There are some other providers that do a really good job of identifying what kind of traffic you're going to send up front. So I talked about Bandwidth earlier. Bandwidth actually does a really good job of vetting their customers before they become their customers. So they kind of do it up front. Again, that's kind of what we do as well. We really make sure that you're sending the right kind of traffic up front. Others, again, like the Twilios of the world, they generally are going to just build in that automated system and leverage that. So, Lynn, I'll get back to you. I wrote that down and I will look into that company a bit more and then I can try to help you out there. Cheryl asks, how can I avoid my messages being filtered? I want a local number, but I'm nervous about the filtering. That's a really good question. And I know we've been talking quite a bit about filtering today. We are going to do an entire webinar about filtering. And so we will we'll approach that in a much deeper way in a future webinar, but just really high level quickly. There is this concept of what is called the bad word bank, is what we have here internally. And it's a bunch of words that if you use them in their message, we have seen them get filtered more likely than not, essentially. There's a higher likelihood of your message being filtered if you're using some of these keywords in your messages. These are things, for example, in the financial space, if you use free, act now, hurry, this offer won't last forever, etc. You're using all caps, you're using the money sign and stuff like that. Those things are indicative of course, financial messages. So there could be an actual specific use case for that. So you might have signed up for a outreach about new cars that are coming from Chevrolet or something like that. So Chevrolet might say, "Hey, Will, we just got 5 new vehicles in at your location. I would hurry, act now if you can. The offer that we currently have is only while supplies last, etc." They may be like totally honest and very reputable. However, a lot of those keywords are the same as keywords that you would use in an actual scam where you're trying to scam people out of money. And so they could lead to filtering. So those are some of the words. Others are just in this acronym called SHAFT. SHAFT is sexual messages or sexual content, harassment, alcohol, firearm, and tobacco. And so if you have, if you're advertising alcohol, whatever the case may be, or you're sending, explicit messages, those are definitely going to be more likely to be to be filtered. So, last question that I think we're going to be able to get to today. As a CRM, can we make the 10DLC approval process easier for our customers? That's a wonderful question, Stephen. And yes, you absolutely can. Here is how I would recommend making the approval process easier for your customers. The first part is take steps away from your customers. So what we do is we try to offer our customers the ability to have templated submissions. So what I mean by that is that your description and your opt-in message, opt-out message, keywords, etc., are going to be pretty similar for a 2FA campaign or a notification campaign or something like that. Even if it's a marketing campaign, the description and the sample messages, a lot of them are going to be pretty similar. So we template these out so that your campaign submission is significantly quicker than if it wasn't templated out. Same as on the brand side. Remove the information that's not necessary. If you look at the TCR's website, you can see all of the different fields that you have to fill in. Some of them are optional, some of them are not optional, some of them it depends on if you're a public company, private company, etc. Only show your users the fields that they actually need to fill in. Remove steps from them. Each step is another hurdle from them being activated and using your platform. And so I would 100% encourage you to take as many of those steps away as possible. I would also encourage using either some kind of overlay on your site or having a direct person being there to help the user walk through it their first time that they're submitting it, because it is kind of a challenging thing. What I've heard from customers in the past is that people will put in the business name as like a fake business name or my business, whatever the case may be. They may not necessarily know the like not seriousness because there's no like penalty, of course, but they may not know how important it is to make sure that what they're putting in is correct. So I would just make sure that you educate them up front, remove as many steps as possible, and help guide them throughout the process. Because if you do that, you are 100% setting them up for success. And if you want to chat about how, like, brainstorm about different ideas to do that, please let me know. I think the other component is the campaign review itself. If there's any way for you to help your users during the sales process or early in onboarding to go through and kind of review their websites with them and identify that. I mean, it depends on what kind of resources you have. I know that that's asking a lot is as far as sort of human resources, but anything that you can automate, use AI to make a little bit quicker or to just take steps and complexity away from the user, I think is always a good option, Stephen. So thank you so much for the question and thank everyone for the questions. I think that's really all the time we have for today. But we will be coming live with another webinar. I think the next one that we're going to be doing actually is eliminating rather the 10DLC A2P carrier filtering. So we're going to be doing a master class on all of the different ways that you can make sure that your messages aren't getting filtered. And we'll have a resource for you about the bad word bank as kind of a cheat sheet as you are creating your messages. So anyway, I appreciate everyone for being here. If you need anything from me, please again reach out. That's will@signalhouse.io. Please check out our LinkedIn. Just look up Signal House. Same with our Facebook group. And yeah, I'm happy to help. Any questions you have, I will absolutely answer them. I just want to see people have success in the industry. If we can make the messaging ecosystem better, that is all we want to do. So thanks so much, and I hope all of you have a good rest of your day. Thanks.